Soli, and you have met my team. And I also want to point out, sitting at the council table is Marissa DeVault, she's the defendant in this case. Now I want to start my opening statement by pointing out a few of the jury instructions that the judge read to you already yesterday when we finalized the jury. And one of those is in the duty of juror section. And it basically says, please keep an open mind. That's kind of the gist of it. We selected each and every one of you because we thought you all could keep an open mind. And that's why both sides kind of came to an agreement that you were the people that we wanted for our jury. And so I just want you to make sure that you're going to be able to listen to all the evidence here and not make prejudgments about what you've heard now and what you're about to hear when we start taking testimony. Another thing I'd like to point out is that the lawyer's statements are not evidence. So each side basically has a theory of their case, and we present it to you. And you kind of fit in, you hear what the evidence is, and you figure out what the facts are. You decide what the law is, and the bottom line is you come to a decision about what you think should happen in this case. Because the lawyer's statements are not evidence, and that is in your jury instructions as well, page 4. I'm here to tell you that what Ms. Areno just said, all that stuff she said, not evidence. All the stuff I'm going to say, not evidence. Okay? So what we're talking about is what we think what our theories of the case are here. Okay? And then you're going to hear the evidence, and you're going to figure out which stories kind of match and which don't, and which ones are kind of outlandish and which ones aren't. And that's your job, is basically as a jury, decide what those facts are and apply those to the law and come to a decision. Now you've heard the state's theory of the case and what they expect the evidence will show. And Ms. Areno went on and on. She talked a lot about different aspects of the case. She talked about insurance. She talked about Allen Flores, who you will be hearing abundantly about. Okay? She talked about Travis Tetro. Okay? She talked about Stan Cook, the roommate that she had mentioned that was living with Dale and Marissa at the time, and their 3 children. She talked about finances. She talked about a trust fund. And the list basically goes on. She went on for a while and talked about different things. But I'm here to tell you that this case is nothing. It's not about any of that stuff. Okay? That's the state's attempt to get to premeditation. But in this case, what we have here, if you just look at the basic facts, I'm going to tell you a secret to this case. It's basically, there's 3 things that I want you to take with you. 3 things, okay? And those 3 things at the end of the day, I believe, are what is going to decide this case. Okay? The first thing I want you to remember, Marissa called 911 right away. Okay? You'll hear testimony from the first responders probably today that she had fresh blood on her. And when she asked immediately, she said it was her husband's blood. Okay? So this happened immediately. And she didn't call once. She called twice. She called again. Okay? She wanted to make sure that this was reported to the police. And you'll also hear from the first responders, like I said, probably today, if not Monday, that her demeanor at the time was basically she was hysterical. Okay? She was in hysterics. They couldn't even understand what she was saying. And I think that's a really important aspect of this case. Okay? Second thing, the victim in this case, Mr. Harrell, was Dale Harrell. He was Marissa's husband. And he was severely injured by this beating with the hammer. But he wasn't treated for his injuries. Okay? And the evidence will show that his condition was, at the time, actually improving over time. So he was being treated and he was improving. Unfortunately, Mr. Harrell succumbed to what's known as a pulmonary embolism at the hospital and later died. And it was the cause of the death can be attributed to the beating. But the fact that he lived for a while and didn't die right away, I think is very important. Okay, so keep that in mind. And then finally, when the officers arrived on the scene, they not only met Marissa. You'll hear evidence that they met Stan Cook right there. He was at the house, came right out of the house, okay? Stan had a gun on him. He had a gun on him, okay? And there were other guns in the house. Had this been a planned event, why wouldn't she have just told them that, shot Dale and told him that was he was trying to hurt me, so I shot him? It would have been so much easier. It'd be so much less messy. I mean, you can look at our client. Look how tiny she is. Okay. Dale was a big guy here. Why would she take a hammer and hit him over the head if there were guns in the house? I mean, she was planning this. So keep all those facts in mind. Those are very important here, okay? Now I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the other things that you're going to hear in this case. First thing, Allen Flores. You're going to be hearing a lot about Mr. Flores at this trial. But what you don't know, I think we've alluded to it a little bit in in some of the preliminary statements that you've heard. Mr. Flores has been given immunity. Do you know what immunity is? Immunity is basically when the state wants somebody to testify, they grant that person immunity. Okay? That means that whatever he says during the course of this trial, during the course of his testimony, cannot be used against him. Okay? State can still prosecute him if they, for other charges. But basically, he is free and clear for this trial. And because that's the case, the state has a deal with him. There is an agreement, okay? So when you have an agreement, everybody knows that an agreement means that one party gets a benefit from the agreement and the other party gets a benefit from that agreement, okay? So the state is getting the benefit of Mr. Flores' testimony here. And Mr. Flores is getting the benefit of not being prosecuted for certain crimes, okay? And you will hear what those crimes are. One of them is for child pornography, for accessory to homicide in this case, for obstruction of justice, okay? And for false reporting in this case, okay? State is giving him a pass because they want his testimony so bad because they want to get to our client right here. So you're going to have to keep that in mind throughout this trial. Okay? You heard a lot about the finances and the promissory note of $300,000 worth of loans that Mr. Flores was providing to our client. What you don't know is that Mr. Flores is a control freak. Okay? He was keeping a ledger of all this stuff. Okay? And not only was he keeping a ledger, he was basically jacking up the prices. Okay? So, like, for example, half gallon milk was like $4.50 or something, and he was keeping detailed lists. But that is part of Mr. Flores' character. Mr. Flores is a very rich man, okay, but he uses his money, his finances, to control other people. And you're going to hear testimony here and see testimony that he likes to control people. He is a master manipulator. Now, at one point, we're going to concede that our client was trying to manipulate him a little bit. But in the end, Allen Flores, the master manipulator, controlled this situation. And he was controlling the whole thing from behind the scenes. You're going to hear all sorts of information about that. Okay? For one thing, they were talking a lot about insurance here in this case. But Mr. Flores is an insurance agent, okay? He was advising Marissa on the insurance issues. So right there, that should be a red flag for you, okay? what he was doing was trying to get her to a point with all these promissory notes that he was having her fill out. It was an effort to control Marissa and keep her in the relationship at some point. Okay? Because if you think about it, she signed all these promissory notes for him. What could he have done if she didn't if she didn't pay? Where could he have gone? Is he going to take her to court? That really wouldn't be an option for him. So this is really more about control than about money. Okay. And then his story just doesn't add up. This guy is a guy that went to Yale. He's a very smart man. He's got his own computer consulting business. Okay. He's telling us that basically the week before, that Marissa had told him that Dale was killed with a tire iron prior in time. But he never contacted the police. And I'm assuming he never went online to find out any information. And all of a sudden, about a week into it, he thinks, this is strange. I think I'll go over to her house. I insist that I come over to her house. That story is just preposterous. Why would a person not go to the police if he heard that somebody's husband was killed? Or why would he not, act on that information? At least look it up. I mean, it's not like it's not going to be on the news or something, right? So his actions toward the end of December 2008, January 2009 are very suspect. You're going to hear a lot more about that. Okay, that should whet your appetite for that. We believe that Mr. Flores was trying to cover his tracks because he had a whole bunch of stuff that he doesn't want anybody to know about, but it's coming out now. And that's what's covered in this immunity. Okay? Now the insurance. Insurance, it really is a non-starter here. This is, I believe, something the state is really grasping at. Many couples get insurance when they're divorcing. Many couples get insurance, multiple policies. And if there was really any problem with the insurance, most of you probably have insurance. I know I can't, if I want to insure somebody as a beneficiary, I know that.
Sustain counsel's opening statement and argument.
Thank you, Judge. Let's talk about the insurance. The evidence will show that she never filed a claim on any of the insurance here. Okay, and so that's a really important thing to take into account. The evidence will also show that none of the documents were forged, none of the documents are falsified, and believe me, the Gilbert Police Department checked. Okay. And the evidence will show that Dale had to have known about those policies. He had to have known. He had to have signed those in order for the insurance to kick in. Okay, the trust fund. The evidence will show that there actually was a trust fund. There is a trust fund for Marissa. She did have a stepfather. Her mother and her stepfather separated very early on. Her stepfather never had any other children, never got into any other relationships. He had set this up for Marissa. Granted, it didn't contain millions and millions of dollars, but it had a substantial amount of money. Okay. And so when she's talking about this, she may have overinflated the amount, but there is a trust fund out there for it. And that, my understanding is that remains to this day. Okay? Stan Cook. Now, Stan lived at Marissa's house, and he was president of the house at the time when Dale was hit with cancer. The evidence will show that Stan did confess to the crime. He had a notarized statement, took it to first Tempe, as Ms. Arena pointed out. Then he took it to Gilbert because he didn't know the right police station to take it to, apparently. The evidence will show that Mr. Flores was the one who edited Stan's letter. He edited the letter. It was on his computer. And the problem with Stan testifying in this case, and you'll see him testify, he's a bright guy, but he basically has no memory. Okay? because of the traumatic brain injury. He remembers some things, he doesn't remember other things. It's a documented fact. It's unfortunate, but it will make for an interesting trial. Literally, it will be interesting. Travis Tatro. This here is another red herring. Travis Tatro was purportedly the hitman, hired by Marissa to kill Dale. Okay? But you got to ask yourselves, if she hired a hitman, why would she have hit Dale over the head with a hammer? It doesn't make sense. And this is all coming from Allen Flores, a man who has been granted immunity to benefit the state. Okay? You know, and under this theory, you know, if Travis would have done it, then why wouldn't she have gone out and hired another hitman or whatever? That does not add up. And Allen Flores' story not only does not add up on that point, it doesn't add up on many other points. So you'll probably hear from Travis. He'll be coming in here. He looks a little bit scary, but he's actually really articulate and mild-mannered. So you will hear from him. Now let's talk about this case. The essence of this case is about domestic violence. Okay? The evidence will establish that Marissa was the victim of domestic violence by Dale. And you'll hear expert testimony on that fact about how domestic violence works. And you have to keep in mind, though, with regard to domestic violence, you know, sometimes what happens is, you know, when you're in a family situation, you don't want people outside your family knowing that you're a victim of domestic violence because they might think poorly of you, right? So naturally, you're going to try to hide that. So when you investigate cases of domestic violence, it's not easy to find people who come forward and corroborate that. Okay, but you have to look at some, like I said, you have to look at all the evidence, and some of it will be circumstantial, but we believe some of it will be direct, and we believe that evidence will convince you that there was domestic violence here. You'll also hear, as part of this expert testimony, that Marissa has in the past suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay. And this fact is not disputed by the state's expert. Okay. And why is this important?
Objection.
Okay. When we talk about the jury instructions, you've been read the instruction on premeditation, okay? And you'll see what that is, and there'll be another instruction at the end of the case for you. But one of the instructions in here dealt with the justification defense, and it said that you have to consider the evidence in light of what a reasonable person basically would have done in that situation. And in this case, because there is PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, you have to consider that evidence in light of the fact that there is PTSD here. Okay?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained counsel, it's not a correct statement of the law.
Okay, I'll just move on then. Some of the evidence that you will also see here in this case will be photographs. You'll hear DNA evidence. DNA evidence that confirms that Dale's DNA was found under the fingerprints, or under the fingernails of Marissa at the time. You'll also see photographs that indicate there were finger marks on her and other marks on her. She was subjected to a sexual assault examination, and you will be hearing from that person as well in this trial. Okay. So, just recapping, finally, what I think this case is going to be about are the three things, right? And those things are that Marissa did not, she called 911 right away, and she called twice, okay, right at the time of this offense. The victim in this case did not die right away. Unfortunately, he did sustain severe injuries, and he did succumb to those injuries eventually. But he did not, he lived for a few weeks, and he was improving in this case, okay? And once again, the point that Stan had a gun on his person, and that gun was given to him by none other than Allen Flores. Okay? And if this had been a plan, why not use the gun? Okay? And when you look at all those three things, I'm confident that you will come back and you will find our client justified in what she did and find her not guilty of this premeditated pursuit.
Members of the jury, I've given you very specific written instructions. Those are the instructions that apply. And as both lawyers have told you, what's said in opening statement is not evidence. But to help you understand the evidence and kind of get an idea or roadmap where we're going